So would you please state your full name for the record?
Abdi, Abdilahi Ahmed.
Abdi, Abdilahi Ahmed.
And what year were you born in?
54.
Okay. Where do you currently live?
Gebili,
And
Gebili,
what country is that in?
Somaliland.
Somaliland.
Do you identify with a Somali tribe? Which
Yes.
one?
Isaq.
Isaq.
Are you married?
Yes.
And do you have any children?
Yes.
Okay. What's your current occupation?
Askari.
Soldier.
Where are you a soldier?
Somaliland.
Somaliland.
What branch of the military in Somaliland are you a soldier in?
Taib to Gebili.
Gebili
Somaliland.
Division of Somaliland.
Okay. And is it the Army, the Navy? What part of the military are you in?
Waa ciidamada militariga ee bariga.
The military, it's the one is on the land. That's what he said.
And for Somaliland?
Yes.
Okay. What's your current rank?
Gaashaanle.
Major.
And how long have you served in the Somaliland military?
Since the establishment of Somaliland.
And what year was that?
1991 to present.
And what is your current, you mentioned that you're a major as your rank. What is your current role in the Somaliland military?
I am the commander of Gebili Brigade in Somaliland.
And how long have you been the commander of the Gebele Brigade in Somaliland?
8 years.
What position did you hold prior to being the commander in Gebele for the Somaliland military?
At one point, I was the deputy commander, and at another point, I was the commander of a battalion.
Did you have any other positions in the Somaliland military?
No.
Could you please tell me what formal education you've received?
Up to high school in Somalia.
Do you know the defendant in this case, Yusuf Abdi Ali?
Yes.
And how do you know him?
He used to be my commander.
Where was he your commander?
Gebili, Somaliland.
And when was he your commander?
We were together from 1980s to 1988.
And so this was when you were in the Somalia or the Somali military as opposed to the Somaliland armed forces?
Yes.
Okay. And did you ever know the defendant, Yusuf Abdi Ali, to go by any other names?
Used to call Tuke.
And why was he called 2K?
I was told it's nickname, and that it came from his grandfather.
What about the plaintiff in this matter? Do you know Farhan Mohammed Tani Warfa?
Yes.
How long? When did you first meet him?
2005.
And how did you meet him?
He was one of the elders of Gebili town, and I know him.
And is that the town where you lived in 2005?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to ask you a few questions about your time in the Somali land forces. You mentioned that you joined the Somali. When did you join the Somali the Somali army?
76.
Okay. And what year did you leave the Somali National Army?
88.
And when you left the Somali National Army, where did you go?
I joined SNM.
And what does SNM stand for?
It was an organization that was fighting Somali government.
And do the letters SNM stand for anything?
Somali Liberation Movement.
Okay. Was the Somali Liberation Movement also referred to as the Somali National Movement?
Yes, they used to call that.
So can you describe what is the Somali Liberation Movement or the Somali National Movement?
It was Somali National Movement Liberation.
But what was its purpose?
To overthrow Siad Barre's regime.
Okay. And who's Siad Barre?
The Somali president.
When?
And all the time before 1991.
What kind of organization was the Somali National Movement? Was it a political organization, a military organization?
Those organization that was armed.
Okay. And were they engaged in any active fighting against anyone at the time?
Somali military.
And how long were you a member of the Somali Liberation or National Movement?
3 years and a half.
Okay. From what years to what year?
From 1988 until 1991.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to your, to ask you some questions about your time in the Somali National Land Forces or Army. Okay, where were you initially stationed when you joined the Somali National Army in 1976?
Training school that was in Sheikh.
And how long were you in that training school?
1 year.
Okay. After that training school, where were you stationed next?
Another military school called Dirruwaine.
Okay. And was that what sort of training were you getting at that military school?
The way to run and operate the tanks.
And how long were you there?
I was there 78 until 79.
At the tank training school?
Yes.
Okay. After you left the training school, the training for being a tank operator, where in the Somali National Forces did you go next?
Hargeisa.
And how long were you stationed in Hargeisa?
Until 1988.
So you were in Hargeisa from 1979 until 1988?
No.
Okay. So how long were you stationed in Hargeisa?
Before the 80s.
And then when you left Hargeisa, where were you stationed after that?
Gibili.
Okay. And when were you stationed in Gebele?
1980.
Okay. Until when?
Until 88.
And was your service in Gebele continuous from 1980 until 1988?
Yes.
Could you also just tell us the different assignments or positions that you held when you were in the Somali the Somali military forces?
I did not have any leadership position or any direct ranks. I was operating the tanks.
And what ranks did you hold during your time? What was your last rank in the Somali National Forces?
I was first warrant officer.
Okay. And the entire time you testified that you were involved with tank operations?
Yes.
When you were in Gebele, were you assigned to a particular unit or part of the Somali National Army?
No.
Okay. Was the base what was the base in Gebele? Was it part of any battalion, brigade of the Somali Army?
Hargeisa 26th sector.
Okay, and what about the one? So it was part of the Hargeisa 26th sector. Were you assigned to a brigade or a brigade or a battalion when you were in Gebele?
I was working with the tank division, and it was part of the brigade.
Which brigade?
5th Brigade of Gebele.
Okay. And who was the commander at the 5th Brigade when you were there?
Yusuf Abdilahi.
What were could you describe the type of uniform that you wore when you were a member of the 5th Brigade in Gebele?
Yes, those 3 different types.
Okay. Can you please describe each one?
Yes.
Can you please go ahead and describe each one?
One of them was a camouflage, the other one was a gray khaki, and the other one was a dark one that you wear when you are running the tank, and the dark hat that we wear.
So starting with the camouflage one, what color was it?
It had dots.
Okay. And what color was it?
It's a different colors, and it's the dots that the normal camouflage has.
And the colors of the dots and the part that were not dots, what actual color was it? Do you know?
Green dots and black dots, the combination of both.
And when would you wear that uniform?
At the time of fight, or the times that you are in training, that you are to test firing your guns.
The other uniform, the khaki uniform, when would you wear those uniforms?
When you are doing your normal duty, such as when you are on guard and when you are doing other activities in the base.
Okay. And I think you mentioned the black one was when you would be working on the tank?
Yes.
And by working on the tank, does that mean maintenance type activities?
When you are cleaning, when you are removing dust from it, when you are working inside or outside it, that's when you use the black.
Okay. Going back to the green camouflage uniform, did all of the soldiers at the Gebele base when you were stationed there in the 80s, did all of the soldiers wear the same uniform?
All the people who are part of the brigade, yes.
Were there any soldiers who wore any different type of uniform who were stationed at the base?
No.
And was the uniform that camouflage uniform that you were describing, was that uniform the same type of uniform that other soldiers and other bases who were part of the Somali National Forces, is it the same uniform that they would wear?
Yes.
I want to talk a little bit or ask you some questions about the training that you received when you were in the Somali National Army. You mentioned in your testimony that you were in training from approximately 1976 until 1979. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you just briefly tell us the type of training that you received? First, let's start with the type of training you received during those years.
Yes.
So please describe the type of training you received during those years.
When I went first in 1976 to the Sheikh training school, they teach us normal duties for the soldiers and how to use small arms and how to follow the orders from the commanders and the discipline of the soldiers and how to follow the orders.
Okay. Let me ask you a few questions about following orders. Could you give me a little more detail about the type of training you received with respect to following orders?
Yes.
Please explain.
The hierarchy is that every soldier must take orders from anyone who has above ranks than his.
And what's the importance? What is the importance of soldiers following orders from other soldiers who are of a higher rank? Could you describe what the importance or significance of that is in the military?
Every soldier must take orders from his commanders or superiors to make sure that the normal operation and functioning within the base and outside the base. And that's how the hierarchy works, and that's how they follow.
Okay. And what happens if a soldier, when you were in the Somali National Forces, what would happen if a soldier did not follow an order from a superior officer? Were you in the military?
Yes.
Were you part of the chain of command?
I was a soldier.
Were you given orders?
Yes.
Were you told what would happen if you did not follow orders?
Yes.
Did you receive training to that effect?
Yes.
So can you tell me what would happen to a soldier based on your training and experience in the Somali National Army if he or she did not follow orders?
What could happen is that they will take him to court, to discipline him, and to fine him. All those things could happen to him.
Okay. Are you familiar with the phrase chain of command?
Yes.
Please describe what is the chain of command when you were in the Somali National Forces.
For example, if the commander of the brigade give a command to his people who are working under him, then they will give the same order to the people who are under them, and that's how it works.
Based on your training and experience in the Somali National Army, what's your understanding of the importance of the chain of command?
The whole purpose is the chain of command is that to run a smooth operation and nothing goes wrong and the orders to be followed.
Are you familiar with the Geneva Conventions?
I know some. I heard some of it.
What's your understanding of what is the Geneva Convention?
What I understand is that when the soldiers are fighting, if they capture prisoners, they must treat them well and they must take care of the prisoners and they not mistreat.
What about training that you received when you were part of the Somali National Army with respect to the treatment of civilians? Please describe what training you received regarding that.
not to kill or harm the civilians, to protect the civilians. If it's in the battlefield, must be protected and protected from anyone who's trying to harm the civilians.
Did you, when you were in the Somali National Army, did you receive any training about what commanders do?
Yes.
So what's your understanding of what the obligations of a commander, what are the obligations of a commander in the Somali National Army?
The commander must to do his duties accordingly when he's in the base and his soldiers.
And when you were in the Somali National Army, what was your understanding, based on your training and experience, of the obligations of a commander when their subordinates committed human rights abuses?
He must take an action against anyone who committed the act against civilians.
And what about the subordinates, the ranks underneath commanders and other subordinate ranks? What were their duties?
To follow the orders of the commander and to do it as instructed and the way he instructed them.
I believe that you let me just ask you again, when you were in Gebele, who was the commander of the military base in Gebele when you were in the Somali National Army?
I was part of the 5th Brigade and the commander was Yusuf Abdi Ali.
And do you know what was the time period that he was the commander at the base?
The time I was there from 80s up to 88, he was there.
Okay. Can you describe within the 5th Brigade in Gebele during the time period that you were there, could you describe the structure of the formal chain of command within the 5th Brigade?
He was the commander of the base, and the soldiers who were working under him, officers, were taking orders from him, and the officers were giving orders to the people who were working under them.
Okay. What about within the brigade? Were there particular units or sections within the brigade that you could describe?
Division?
So within the brigade, other than the soldiers, were there units or battalions or things of that nature that you could describe the structure of the brigade?
Yes.
Okay, please describe.
The brigade consists of 3 battalions.
Okay. What were those battalions?
There are 3 battalions, and all the 3 battalions combined, we call them brigade.
Okay. And did the battalions, were they particular types of battalions?
Yeah, it was within the brigade, but there was group for the logistic, and there were other group for the structure.
And within each battalion, what was each battalion made out of, comprised of?
And the battalion had 3 platoons. Sorry, 3 companies.
So each battalion had 3 companies?
Yes, it had 3 companies, yes.
And what was each company made comprised of?
Platoon.
And how many platoons in each company?
3 platoons.
And what was each platoon comprised of?
We call them sections. They call sections.
Okay. And what was each section comprised of?
That's the lowest. That's all I know.
Okay. And did sections have soldiers in it?
Yes.
Okay. And who was responsible for all of that?
The commander of the brigade.
And who was that at the time when you were at Gebele?
Yusuf Abdi Ali was.
When you were at Gebele, did you ever personally interact with the defendant Yusuf Abdi Ali?
Yes.
And how often would you would you either see him or have some sort of interaction with him?
When I am on duty and I'm a guard, then I used to see him.
Did you ever speak with him, or did he ever speak with you?
Yes, I spoke with him.
And did he ever give you orders?
No special orders, but I met with him.
Would you hear the defendant give orders to other soldiers?
Yes.
So generally speaking, based on your experience and understanding, how were orders disseminated in the 5th Brigade from the defendant, Yusuf Abdilahi, to the other soldiers in the base?
There were two kinds of orders. One is at the time of war, and the other one is at the time of peace. And always he shares his commands with the people who are working under him, and they will share with the battalion and then the company, and it goes down that way.
And is that under time of war or time of peace, what you just described?
At the time of peace.
Okay. What about in time of war?
And at the time of war, it would be like that.
Okay. So under time of war and time of peace, it followed the same structure that you just described?
Yes.
Did you ever observe the defendant, Yusuf Abdilahi, give an order to one of his subordinates and then observe it being given to other soldiers?
Yes, he was given orders while he was in front of us.
And could you describe, so after an order is given, could you describe generally, based on your experience in the Somali National Army, could you describe how it was communicated back that those orders had been followed and executed on?
His subordinates will share with him his order and the result of that order.
And how would his subordinates find out about whether those orders were followed and completed?
They will be present of their operations.
And did you ever personally observe this reporting of orders up the chain?
Yes.
When you were with the Somali National Army in Gebele under the command of the defendant, Yusuf Abdilahi, to your knowledge, were any soldiers ever intentionally excluded from this system of receiving orders and giving reports that you just described?
Yes.
What type of soldiers would be excluded from this system of orders and reports?
The soldiers who had lineage with the Isaac.
And how do you know that that soldiers with the Isaac lineage would be excluded from this system of orders and reports?
I knew all the soldiers who were there, all who those belonged to Isaac clan.
So you knew the Isaac soldiers, but how do you know that they were being excluded?
I saw them did not go or was not part of the commands or the operations.
What exactly did you see? Could you describe or give an example of what you would see that would tell you that Isaac soldiers were being excluded from the system of orders and reports?
For example, there will be an order to gather the people belong to the Isaac who were suspected that they are members of the SNM. When the soldiers go out to that kind of operations, the Isaac soldiers will be excluded. They won't go with them.
And you mentioned earlier that you're a member of the Isaac clan. Were you excluded from certain orders and reports, to your knowledge?
Yes.
Why were the Isaac soldiers excluded from this system of orders and reports?
At the time of peace, but at the time of war, when there are operations and they want to capture the people belonging to the Isaac, they were excluded because they were suspecting that they are their members of their clan and they will be kind to them. So for that reason, they were excluded.
To your knowledge, soldiers in the chain of command at the base in Gebele, did they obey Colonel Yusuf Abdiali's orders?
Yes, the people he sends to do the operation, other than the ones who don't belong to that tribe, yes.
Did you ever observe a soldier refuse an order from Colonel Yusuf Abdilahi?
Yes, I have seen.
What kind of orders did you observe them not obey?
What they used to do was they would arrest if someone refused to take his orders at a time of peace or at a time of war.
You said you observed an instance when a soldier did not obey an order. Was it a particular type of order?
Normal operations, yes. There will be some soldiers who will refuse his orders and they would be arrested.
What was the command climate? How would you describe the command climate in the 5th Brigade under Colonel Yusuf Abdilahi when you were there at the base in Gebele. What was the command climate at the 5th Brigade when you were stationed there?
The climate was not good for the members of Isaac clan, but the others, it was normal for them.
And why was the climate not good for the members of the Isaac clan under the defendant's command?
Always the orders that were coming down at the time were orders against it from the Isaac clan, and they were not happy about that, the Isaacs.
And what types of orders against the Isaac clan what types of orders against the Isaac clan was the defendant giving when you were stationed at Gebele? And who was arresting the members of the Isaac clan?
The soldiers who were getting orders from the commander.
Which commander?
I'm talking about Yusuf Abdilahi.
Okay. Based on what you observed, how were the members of the Isaac clan treated by the soldiers who arrested them pursuant to the orders given by the defendant?
The people they capture, whether they are civilians or intellectuals, whatever they are, if they are in small number, they will be put in the small cell in the base if they are about 10 people. If they are more than 10 people, they will be kept guarded somewhere in the base that they were placed.
Were the members of the Isaac clan that you observed being arrested by the soldiers under the defendant's command, were they civilians or members of a military?
Civilians.
And how, you mentioned, you testified earlier about that you had received training, about the treatment of how military soldiers are supposed to treat civilians. Is that correct?
Yes, but this treatment was different.
Okay. How is it different?
They were pressuring particular people.
And which particular people were they pressuring?
Isaac people.
And how were they pressuring the Isaac people?
They were killing, they were beating them because they belonged to the Isaac clan, SNM.
Did you personally observe members of the Isaac clan being arrested by military soldiers who were under the defendant's command at Gebele?
Yes.
How often would you say during your service at Gebele under the defendant's command did you observe this type of treatment of Isaac civilians by soldiers under his command?
At least 5 times.
And when you, to your knowledge, did the defendant ever punish the soldiers that committed the acts that you described? Did the defendant ever punish the soldiers who were under his command who committed the acts that you described to the Isaac civilians that were being arrested?
No.
Did the defendant order that the Isaac people who were arrested, were the soldiers arresting the Isaac people as you just described under the defendant Yusuf Abdiali's orders?
Yes.
I want to ask you now some questions about the actual base at Gebele. When you were stationed there in the 80s as part of the Somali National Forces, how big was the base in Gebele?
4 kilometers square.
I'm going to show you some photos. I'm passing to Defendant's Counsel what I've marked as Defendant's Exhibit 9, Plaintiff's Exhibit 9. And I did mark it on yours, Joseph. I'll mark
That's
the
all
next
right.
one.
That's all right. I'll mark it.
So I'm showing you Plaintiff's Exhibit 9. Would you please, do you recognize that photo?
Yes.
Would you tell me what it is a photo of?
The office of 2K, at the time he was the commander of the brigade, Yusuf Abdiali.
Okay. And where the office of 2K, so is that the office of 2K where, in what base? If actually you turn the photo back around, and just tell me what city was this base in that you're referring to?
Gebele.
And does this photo, does it fairly and accurately depict what the base in Gebele looked like in the time period that you served there in the 1980s.
Yes.
I would ask that you turn the photo around to demonstrate it the way you were about to do. And then I would ask the videographer to please zoom out so that he can capture the photo. So you said a moment ago that you saw the defendant, Colonel Yusuf Abdilahi, who's also known as 2K. You mentioned that you saw his office in this picture. Would you please point to where was his office?
Yes.
Would you please point to where the defendant's office is in that picture?
Right there.
Okay. The white building in the center of the photo with a red-looking roof on top, that's what you're pointing at, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You could remove your finger from the pointing. There is what appears to be a wall, some sort of wall structure. Could you tell me what was that wall that we see there? Is that a building or a barrier?
Yes.
Okay. What is it?
There is a wall that was surrounded, and at the time that spot was a jail.
Where, you mentioned a jail. Where was the jail? If you could point to the area where the jail would have been in this picture.
Yes.
Please point to that area.
It is now destroyed, but it's on that side.
Okay. And may the record reflect that the witness pointed to, is it the left or the right? This is where I always get the the left, the right side of the photo. Yeah. Would you actually take this pen and put an X in the area where you said that the jail was, please? Yes, on the picture. Okay, could you mark it a little bit firmer so? Perfect. And was the jail in front of that wall where you put the mark, or behind the wall, between the wall and the office, that the building that housed the office that belonged to the defendant, Yusuf Abdilahi, who was also known as 2K?
Inside the wall, that was where the jail was.
Okay. Thank you. I'll take this picture.
Waad mahadsantahay sawirkaasi.
I'm going to show you what I've marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 10. What is this a picture of?
It's the Gebele base.
Okay. And is it a fair and accurate representation of what the Gebele base looked like in the 1980s when you served there?
Yes.
And you can turn the photo around now. Again, what are we looking at in this photo? What's the white building with the red roof that I can see in that photo?
Tukis offices.
And I would ask the videographer to zoom out sufficiently so that the photo can be in the picture. The wall there, is that the same wall that you marked on Exhibit 9 with an X? Is that the same wall in this picture?
The same, yes.
And what would be behind that wall in the 80s when you served at Gebele?
Behind it,
Yes.
there were trees there.
Okay. And is this wall the same wall that you marked with an X in Exhibit 9?
Yes.
Could you point to where that area was?
Yes, it was the Tukis offices.
And where could you point to where 2K's offices are? Please point. Okay. And the tan wall on the right-hand side, could you mark where the detention center or the jail was relative to in this picture?
Yes.
So may the record reflect that the witness marked with an X the wall where he's indicated that the jail was. Okay, thank you. I'm going to show you what's been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 12. Okay. What is this a picture of?
The same as Tukis offices.
Okay. And what else is pictured? What else is in this picture?
the jail, the weapon, and the other things that were there.
And does this picture fairly and accurately show what the Gebele base looked like in the 1980s when you served there?
Yes.
Would you please demonstrate the picture, and I would ask the videographer. So could you point to again where you mentioned the defendant, Yusuf Abdilahi, who you've referred to as 2K. Would you point to where you say his offices are?
Yes.
Would you please point to it? Okay. And then would you also point to, you mentioned that in the picture you saw the jail. Would you please point to where on the picture the jail is? So I'm going to ask you to do two markings. So if you could mark on the picture where you're saying 2K's offices are with a circle, and mark with an X where the jail is. Now you place the marking on the actual ground, but could you place your marking on the actual building where 2K's office is? Okay, perfect. So you placed the mark, the circle on a door. Was that the door to 2K's office?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 13. What do you see in this picture?
The jail and the offices are behind. They're not clear.
And does this picture fairly and accurately represent what the jail at the Gebele base looked like in the 1980s when you served at the base?
Yes.
Would you please demonstrate the photo to the camera? And I would ask the videographer to zoom appropriately so that the photo is captured. So where is the building that you described as the jail in this picture?
In front.
Okay. And does the jail look exactly the same as it looked in the 1980s when you served at the base?
It is, but there was destruction that took place.
Okay. So are you saying, am I to understand correctly, that there was some parts of the jail, the jail has suffered some destruction since the 80s?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 14. And what is this a picture of?
It's the same as Tukis offices.
I'm sorry, interpreter, would you just
It's same as Tukis offices.
Okay. And is there anything else in the picture?
I see the trees that used to be in the area before. I see the jail and I see the offices.
Would you please demonstrate the picture as you've done previously, and I would ask the videographer to zoom out or zoom in. Would you just point to where is 2K's office? Okay. And where is the jail? Okay. Plaintiff's Exhibit 15. What's in this picture?
The jail and the trees.
Okay. And does it fairly and accurately depict what the jail looked like in the 1980s when you served at Gebele?
Yes.
Okay, would you please demonstrate the picture and I would ask the videographer to zoom out, zoom in. Okay. Thank you. So you testified earlier that on at least 5 occasions you witnessed Isaac civilians captured by military soldiers who were stationed at Gebele under the defendant's command.
I'll object to that mischaracterization. Captured. I thought he said he observed them arrested.
That you observed them being arrested by members of military soldiers who were under the defendant Yusuf Abdilahi, who you refer to as 2K, those soldiers arrested the ISAC civilians and brought them back to the base and would sometimes put them in a jail. Was that your testimony earlier?
Yes.
Showing you plaintiff's Exhibit 15 again, is that the jail that you're referring to, that the ISAC civilians would be brought after they were arrested by the soldiers?
Yes.
And you testified earlier, you made some reference to, in your testimony earlier, that that whether the civilians were placed in the jail was based on how many civilians were arrested by the military. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Approximately how many civilians would they put in that jail that you're looking at in Exhibit 15?
Objection.
About 20 people.
What's the basis of your
I
objection?
mean, at a time or in the aggregate?
I'm sorry, your answer was, what was your answer?
About 20 people.
And was that 20 people at a time?
Yes. It wouldn't take more than that, so they will keep the others outside of the jail.
And approximately how big was that jail cell where the military soldiers would put 15 to 20 civilians that they arrested?
I don't know the meter, but it was about 20 people what they put.
Okay. But how big was the jail, was the inside of the jail?
It was not big.
And how long, based on your observations, would they keep the civilians in that jail that's in Exhibit 15?
About 10 maximum
10 what?
days.
Okay. And could you, I'll take Exhibit 15 back. Could you describe, based on what you observed when you were serving at Gebele, how the soldiers, or how those civilians were treated by the soldiers who arrested them and were responsible for their detention?
They treated them badly. They used to punish them. They used to tie their hands and legs together. They wouldn't let their relatives to bring food to them, and even they wouldn't let them bring them things that they can sleep on, things that they were giving them difficult time.
Going back, one other question with respect to where the arrested civilians would be kept. If there were more than 20 civilians who were arrested by the members of the military serving at Gebele under the defendant's command, where would those, if there was more than 20, where would those civilians be housed or placed while they were under arrest?
Outside of the big base.
Okay. And in any of the pictures that we showed you, Exhibits 9, 10, in any of the pictures that we showed you, do any of these pictures depict the area that you're referring to as outside, when there was more than 20 arrestees?
Yes.
You know which one of these pictures?
Yes.
Okay, so-
Right there, outside.
If you could actually show
So
show the picture. So just may the record reflect that the witness is demonstrating Exhibit number 14. And would you please point to the area where, the outside area where the arrestees would be held if they were more than 20?
that empty space in front of the jail, that's where they used to keep them.
Okay. Thank you. Showing the witness Exhibit number 12, plaintiff's Exhibit 12. Is that outside area depicted in that picture as well?
Yes, it depicts.
Where? And I just would ask that the witness show the camera
So it got stuck
and then
on
point to.
right, that space in front of the jail, and that was empty space.
Okay. So you testified a moment ago that the arrested civilians would be punished, and you mentioned you also testified that their hands would be would be tied behind their back, and would you please describe that a little bit further?
We call them fig or meek, and what they do, they tie their arms behind their
The
back, and also they tie their legs to their arm, and they put them arms and legs in the area of their back, and then they will put their chest on the ground, and they will tell the person, you are now an airplane, you need to fly. Those who were in jail, what they used to do was they will turn off the lights, and they would use loud microphones, and they would make a loud noise to punish them and distract them. The ones who were outside of the jail, they wouldn't let their family members bring food or bring items to them, and they wouldn't let them have anything.
Okay. Going back to your testimony about the tying of the hands behind their back and to their legs as well, you refer to it as, you said, MIG or FIG?
Yes.
And why was it referred to as the MIG?
They will do it like the way the planes look like. They will tie their hands and their legs together, and they will put their chest on the ground, and then they will look like an airplane, and they will tell them, now you are an airplane, you need to fly.
Okay. And what was the purpose of putting the civilians who were arrested in this position?
To punish and to torture them, it was that.
And what were they being punished for?
They were telling them that you are S&M, you belong to Isaac.
When the soldiers would put them in this position and tell them that they were S&M, was this following some sort of court proceeding or official proceeding?
No.
Were the soldiers following orders when they were putting the civilian Isaac arrestees in the MIG position? Were they following orders, the soldiers?
Yes, the commander.
Okay. When you say the commander, who are you referring to?
Yusuf Abdilahi.
So with respect to the MIG position, how long would the civilian Isaac arrestees be placed in the MIG position? How long were they made to be in that position?
A lot of time before the person is about to die.
And when you say a lot of time, like how long would you say? Minutes, hours, days?
Example, 25 minutes.
Okay. And what, based on your knowledge, did you ever observe anything happen to the civilians who were placed in this MIG position with their hands tied and legs tied behind their back? Did you ever observe what would happen to the civilians after they were placed in this position?
Yes.
And what would happen to them?
They were telling them you belong to S&M, your son left for S&M, you support them, they travel over your area, you are supporting them, tell them.
Yep. And with respect to the civilians who were placed in this MIG position, did you ever observe what physically happened to their bodies after being placed in this position?
Some of them became disabled because of that. Some of them, their back was broken. Some of them, they get bigger mental illnesses, and some of them still are anxious.
Interpret the very last word you said.
They are still anxious.
Anxious.
Yeah.
Thank you. And how often would you say that you observed the soldiers under the defendant Yusuf Abdiali's command? How often would you say that you observed them placing civilian Isaac arrestees in the MIG position?
All those 5 times I saw them tying them behind of their bags, telling them you have to admit forcefully that you are supporter of S&M, you provide logistics, you provide food when they come to your place, you have to admit that you support them and S&M.
And if the civilians did not admit to that, what would happen?
Some people, when they no longer tolerate the pain, they will admit and they will say, yes, I saw them, yes, I did them, and some other people will stay silent, they will not say anything, and then they will remove from that position.
The members of the Isaac clan were they by did you ever hear them being referred to by other soldiers in the base at Gebele? Did you ever hear them being referred to by any other term or name other than Isaac?
Yes.
And what were those terms?
You are qurmis. You are qurmis.
What does that mean?
You smell bad.
You mentioned earlier during your testimony that that the soldiers at the base at Gebele would refuse to bring food that the arrestees' family members would try to get to them. Was that right? Was that your testimony?
Yes.
And were the arrestees fed during their time in detention?
No, small amount to stay alive.
This term, it was kudmis?
Qurmis.
Kudmis. Did you ever hear the defendant use that term?
Yes.
How often did you hear the defendant use that term?
When there is dispute or disagreement between him and the soldier who is member of the Isaac clan, or when he refuses to take his orders, he will call him, I know you, you belong to Qurmis. And also he used to call that name to the detainees.
Okay. And was that meant as a compliment?
No, it's a derogatory.
And to your knowledge, were civilians from other clans detained at the base at Gebele when you served there in the 1980s?
I haven't seen any.
Based on your training and experience as a soldier in the Somali National Army, was the treatment of the civilian Isaacs who were arrested by the soldiers under the defendant's command consistent with the training that you received with respect to how civilians were to be treated?
No.
To your knowledge, did the defendant ever punish any of the soldiers in his command for treating the civilian Isaac arrestees in this manner?
They used to get a promotion because of punishing the Isaac people. That's what used to happen to them. It was promotion instead.
Mm-hmm. Did you participate in any of these actions against the Isaac people that you just described?
No.
Did your membership in the Isaac clan have any impact on your service in the Somali National Forces?
Yes, my father was killed.
Before we talk about that, in terms of your actual service in the Army, in the Somali National Army, is the fact that you were Isaac, did that impact the way you were treated within the Army?
Yes.
Okay. And would you please describe how it is that it impacted your service in the Somali National Army?
First, I did not get any promotion. The second place is what to say, where we have a good jobs like the banks and opportunities, they will not let us work in that area. If we are entitled to take a leave, they wouldn't let us do that. Always there was threat, there was strong words against us, and other words, and so on.
And you testified earlier about the civilian Isaac arrestees being treated in a way that violated your understanding of the rules on the treatment of civilians in the Somali National Army. What would have happened if you had reported or done something to oppose that treatment while you were at the 5th Brigade? What would have happened to you if you had done that?
They wouldn't listen, and I would be arrested. They would tell us, it's not your business, you don't have anything to do about that, you shouldn't talk about it, and we would be arrested. If they see two individuals belong to the Isaac clan talking about the SNM and why those people are punishing and what's doing that, they will tell us, you will be arrested.
And who's they?
Commanders.
Commanders under who?
Not, it's he himself, he would do.
He himself who?
Yusuf Abdilahi.
When we left off, you had testified earlier about the ISAC civilian arrestees being placed in the MIG position. You mentioned them being fed small portions of food and being denied food that was brought by their family members. Was there any other punishment that you observed those civilians facing when they were detained, when they were arrested by the soldiers from the 5th Brigade?
Yes.
What were those other punishments that you observed?
They banned from them the wells that their livestock used to drink water.
I'm sorry, interpreter, would you please repeat that?
They were banned to get access to the wells that they used to drink the water.
The civilians were banned from drinking water? Is that what your testimony is?
Yes, the nomadic people of Isaac people, they were refused to their livestock to drink water from the valleys.
Understood. But what about when they were detained on the base in Gebele? Was there any other punishments other than the MIG position that you described and the small amounts of food that you mentioned earlier? Any other punishments?
Yes, in that rooms that they were detained in, they did not have lights, they did not provide them water, and they will make a loud noise to punish them.
And for how long would they be deprived of water?
Are you talking about them, or are you talking about the civilians with the livestock?
I'm talking about when the civilians were in the jail at the Gebele base. How long would they be deprived of water?
I'm not talking about them. What I'm talking about are the civilians who look after their livestock.
I see. Okay. But I just want to focus on when the civilians were detained or arrested. When the civilians were arrested and placed on the base, what, if any, other punishments were they given by the soldiers who had arrested them?
They wouldn't let them go outside. They wouldn't let them speak to anyone. They wouldn't let have visitors from outside.
Okay. How long, when they were detained inside that jail cell, how long were they kept in that jail cell every day? Like how many hours per day were they kept in the jail cell?
They wouldn't let them go out, other than sometimes when they go in the evening, they won't let them out until the next day morning to do urine out of the holes that they dig for them.
And when you describe the arrestees being placed in the MIG position, where on the base would that happen?
It was happening inside the base, and it was happening to the people that they gathered from outside in the town and the nomadic people.
Yep. But where in the base, what part of the base would this happen in?
At the center of the base.
Okay. How far away from the jail was the center of the base?
It was far away from that, about 100 kilometers. It was far from the town. It was somewhere between the main entrance and the jail.
The main entrance to the base?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the empty space before the entrance.
So the empty space before the entrance is where the soldiers would put the arrestees in the MIG position?
Yes.
You testified earlier that they would, that the arrestees would be kept in the jail at the Gebele base for 10 days. I think that was your testimony earlier.
Yes.
And what would happen, generally speaking, after those 10 days?
Transferred to Hargeisa.
Transferred to what in Hargeisa?
The commander, the headquarters of the army, they call it Birjah. It was the headquarters of the sector.
Okay. Was there a detention facility there?
Big one, yes.
Okay. And to your knowledge, do you know what would happen to the arrestees after they were transferred to the detention center in Hargeisa?
I was not there. I was not in Hargeisa. I heard a lot of complaints.
So I want to talk, I want to ask you some questions involving an incident from 1987 time period. Are you familiar with an incident involving a water tanker in Gebele?
Okay.
are you familiar with an incident involving a water tanker and the S&M in 1987?
Yes.
What happened?
The S&M kidnapped a water tank that did not belong to the Isaac tribe. Other people belonged to it.
And what happened after the S&M took the water tanker?
They crossed the border between Somalia and Ethiopia with the water tank.
And what, if any, response did the military at the Gebele base, what, if any, response did the military have after the water tanker was taken?
They arrested all the people who lived in the area, including the people who lived in the area where the water tanker traveled through to the border. They collected themselves and their livestock, and they arrested them.
And who arrested them?
The forces that Tuke sent to them.
The area where the water tanker was, does it have a name, or is it a particular area?
It was in the area of Al Bardale.
And how far is that from the Gebele base?
Very far away from it. It's about 50 kilometers west of the Gebele.
And what happened, the folks who were arrested, what were they civilians or members of the S&M, to your knowledge?
The detainees were civilians. They were farmers who were living in the area.
And what happened to their livestock? You mentioned something about their livestock.
The animals were delivered to the force that were under the command of Tuke, and they slaughtered the animals.
And what about the arrested civilians? What happened to them after they were what happened to them immediately after they were arrested?
Pressure, beating, killing, thick.
I'd like to walk you though a little bit more step by step in terms of what happened. So the soldiers went to the area where the water tanker had gone through. You testified that they arrested civilians. What immediately after they were arrested, what happened to the civilians? Where were they brought?
They were brought to the Gebele military base. They were beaten. They were asked to tell what happened to the water tank, what happened, where did it go, and questions that nature that they did not know anything about it.
Okay. And do you remember when approximately this happened?
87.
And do you remember approximately how many civilians were arrested?
I don't know the number, but there were a lot of people.
Could you give an estimate?
Hundreds, including women and children. The area is a very large area, and it's included the area where Farhan resides.
Okay. When they were arrested and brought to the base, where were they detained on the base?
The empty space that I shared with you in the base, what I showed you, that's where they kept the livestock and the people there.
So anywhere else?
No.
I'm showing you plaintiff's exhibit number 9.
Wow.
Do you see that space in this picture?
That empty space outside the base.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to take a pen and mark that space with a circle. And then demonstrate it again. Okay. Thank you. What about the jail that you testified about earlier? Were any of the arrestees detained in that jail?
Yes, the people, individuals that they were paying particular attention to, yes.
And then while they were being detained by the military at the base in Gebele, how were those civilians treated?
Very difficult.
Can you describe in more detail what you mean by very difficult?
Yes.
Please do.
The thick is one of them, beating them, restricting their food. They were suffering particular beating for the people who say something, and they were telling them don't say something. And all the other problems that could happen or harm could happen to anyone.
Did you actually observe this happening to those civilians who were arrested after the water tanker incident?
What water tank, you mean?
the incident that you were just describing, did you actually observe the arrestees being put in the MiG, beaten, all of those things that you described? Did you actually see it yourself?
Yes, after the water tank incident, yes.
Just because I want to be clear, did you actually see the arrestees being beaten by the soldiers, being put in the MiG? Did you actually observe that yourself?
Yes.
And the soldiers, were they following any orders when they were engaging in those activities that you just described?
Yes.
Whose orders were they following?
Yusuf Abdilahi, their commander.
And how do you know it was his order?
The soldiers follow the orders.
And do you know if they reported back to their chain of command with respect to following these orders?
Even the commanders were there, they were present, they witnesses, they were not far away from them.
Did you observe this yourself?
Yes.
You saw the commanders nearby?
I saw them standing over there and telling them, beat them.
Okay. You heard this yourself?
Yes.
Were you, as an ESOC, were you ordered to engage in these activities?
No.
How far away from Colonel Yusuf Abdilahi, who you've referred to as 2K, how far away was his office from where the detainees were being held?
About 80 meters, not far from there.
Okay. Did you observe Colonel Yusuf Abdilahi? Did you observe him present also when the civilians were being beaten or put in the MiG or some of the other activities that you described?
Yes, I saw him standing over there and giving commands to the soldiers.
What commands did you hear him giving?
Beat them, they belong to Qurmis.
How long were the civilians detained at the base following this water tanker incident that you've testified about?
It was about 10 days, and after that they were transferred to Hargeisa.
Were all of them transferred, or?
No, all of them.
Okay. At some point, you testified that you left the Somali National Forces in 1988?
Yes.
Can you describe why you left or the circumstances of your leaving the Somali National Army?
Yes.
Please do.
When the other soldiers who belonged to the same clan as me, Isaac clan, were captured and killed, then I defected.
When you say that other soldiers were captured and killed, who was capturing and killing them?
Tuka was capturing and killing.
Do you remember you said it was 1988. Do you remember the month?
Yes.
What month was it?
6th month.
The 6th month of the year?
Of 88, yes.
So let me ask you, why did you agree to come and testify here today in this proceeding?
I came here to talk about the problems that we had, myself, my family, and my people. When I found out there will be attorneys who involved this issue, I decided to come here and to share.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
You're a soldier, aren't you?
I am.
You became a soldier in 1976, is that right?
Yes.
You became a soldier in service to the Somali National Army in 1976, didn't you?
Yes.
After some training, you ultimately became a tank commander, didn't you?
I was one member of the unit of the tank.
You actually supervised 3 other members of the unit that operated a tank in Gebli, weren't you?
No, I was not. I was only one of the four soldiers who were working in the tank. I was not their commander.
All right. But in any event, you are obligated to follow orders of your superior, aren't you?
It was.
As a soldier, you have a duty of loyalty to your army, don't you?
It is.
You deserted from that army in 1988, didn't you? The Somali National Army.
Yes.
You thereupon joined a guerrilla movement known as the Somali National Movement, didn't you?
I joined.
You took up arms against the Somali National Army that you had originally joined in 1976, didn't you?
Yes.
You took your weapon, your Army-issued AK-47 weapon, with you when you went to join the SNM, didn't you?
I did.
You fired that weapon in conflict with the Somali National Army, didn't you?
Ziad Barre's soldiers. Yes, Ziad Barre's soldiers.
Right? So, fair to say, you're a revolutionary, aren't you?
What do you mean revolutionary?
You revolted against the government of your country, didn't you?
No.
Okay. You assisted the group that brought down the Siad Barre regime in Somalia, the SNM, didn't you?
Yes.
You then continued fighting after 1991 in support of Mr. Igal and his faction over other ISAC, didn't you?
No.
So you didn't act as a soldier after 1991?
I was member of the organization that was liberated the country and was led by Abdurrahman Tour.
What role, if any, did you play in the ensuing conflict among the ISAC in what you call Somaliland?
I was not involved in any fight whatsoever.
So you stayed on the sidelines in that fight, right?
I was not participated, no.
All right. And when the rebels who helped oppose the regime of Siad Barre self-declared the state of Somaliland, you identified with that state, didn't you?
Yes.
And when that self-proclaimed state formed a military, you joined that military, didn't you?
I joined.
And you have been in continuous military service since then to the present, correct?
Yes. Somaliland Force, yes.
Now, your testimony earlier concerning the chain of command, you continue to abide by a chain of command within the military of what you call Somaliland, don't you?
Yes.
And you have to take orders as they're issued from those who are superior in rank to you.
Yes.
And you ultimately are subject to the orders of General Nu Ismail Tani, the commander of the Somaliland forces, aren't you?
Yes.
In fact, here as a witness today in the neighboring state of Djibouti, you are a a commander in the what you call the Somaliland Army, aren't you?
I am.
General Tani knows that you're here, doesn't he?
He gave me leave to come here.
And in fact, you are carrying out his directives here today, aren't you?
I'm on leave.
That wasn't my question.
Huh?
My question called for a yes or a no.
I will take orders from him. I take his orders. Yes.
And he wants you here today, doesn't he?
He gave me permission to come here, and I'm here on my own.
You know that no nation state in the world, not even Djibouti, recognizes Somaliland as a government, do you?
I have nothing to do with the recognition. It's not mine.
Okay. And you gave testimony about civilians, as you called them, being rounded up on the road between Gebeli and the border with Ethiopia. You recall that testimony?
Yes, it related to the water tank.
And in fact, because of your role as a tank commander, you did not participate in military operations outside of the base during 1987 and 1988 when you were under the command of Colonel Yusuf Abdilahi, did you?
No.
So your testimony about civilians being rounded up is based upon something that some people have told you rather than instances or occurrences that you observed with your own eyes. Isn't that true?
I did not understand.
You didn't see people being arrested on the road between Gebeli and the border with Ethiopia, did you?
Yes,
You did?
I saw. Yeah.
So you were, didn't you give evidence earlier in this case that you did not participate in military missions?
Yes.
So in your judgment, investigation of the theft of a water truck by rebels against the government was not part of a military operation?
That I was not part of it. I'm not getting your question.
Okay. Let's move on. So you deserted from the Somali National Army in 1988.
Yes.
You recalled learned counsel for the plaintiff asking you, why did you agree to come here and testify? You recall being asked that question this morning?
Yes.
And you recall your answer where you talked about your father being killed in 1989, don't you?
Yes.
Isn't it a fact that you blame my client, Yusuf Abdilahi, for the death of your father?
Soldiers that he sent there killed him.
And isn't it a fact that you are pursuing this testimony as part of a vendetta against my client, Mr. Ali?
No, but it's what happened.
You testified on direct that you did not meet the plaintiff in this case, Mr. Wafa, until 2005. Isn't that correct?
I've met with him 2005. That's when we were introduced. Are you talking about Farhan?
Talking about the plaintiff.
Yes. Yes, if it's Farhan, I have met with him 2005.
And you said that you were introduced to the plaintiff in 2005. Who introduced you to the plaintiff?
We live in the same area.
And this is the area that you are the commander for, isn't it?
We stay in Gabelay, both of us.
And isn't it true that the plaintiff is deemed to be an elder within that community in Gebele? Is that true?
He is.
So, as a military commander for this army of Somaliland, as you call it, you basically are in charge of the elders within that community that that you're responsible for, aren't you?
I don't command the elders, but we know each other.
So you're just friends?
It's the people that we know each other. We know each other.
You consider yourself a friend of the plaintiff?
No.
So you spent much of your testimony talking about the chain of command and about the structure of the military. And you're a member of the military, aren't you?
I am.
Why aren't you wearing your uniform today?
I am on vacation.
Oh, okay. I have nothing further.
Why is it that you felt the need to leave the Somali National Army in 1988?
When the government captured and killed some of my military members who were belonged to my tribe and killed some of them, then I decided to defect.
What did you think would happen to you if you stayed in the Somali National Army under the command of the defendant, Colonel Yusuf Abdilahi?
If I did not escape, they would capture me the same time that they captured the other ones.
And how did you come to know that they had captured the other Isaac soldiers under the command of the defendant? How did you know that your fellow Isaac soldiers had been captured?
I was on my way to the base and I saw the soldiers being captured, and then I returned.
And when you say you returned, what do you mean?
When I saw the soldiers captured, I returned back and I escaped.
And who had captured the soldiers?
The soldiers that were commanded by Tuke.
Okay. And what type of, and the fellow soldiers that you saw captured, who were they? Who were they?
I came to the gate and I was there present and I saw them being captured, and when I saw them, I returned and left.
Okay. And what clan did those soldiers belong to who were captured?
Isaac tribe.
Did you ever see any of those soldiers again?
No.
The soldiers who captured the Isaac soldiers, who were they?
They were soldiers who did not belong to the Isaac clan, they belonged to the other tribes.
And whose command were they under?
Tuke was their commander.
You seem to exude this clarity about who was an Isaac and who wasn't, don't you?
Isaac and the other people were two separate at the time.
Isn't it true that there was no identification on the uniforms of the soldiers as to what clan that particular soldier belonged to, if any? Was there?
The dress doesn't belong to tribe.
Pardon?
Dress does not belong to tribe.
That wasn't my question. There was nothing in the uniform that indicated who was Isaac and who was not, was it?
No.
The soldiers that served with you on the base, did you know them?
Yes, majority of them I knew.
Did you know which of the soldiers that served on the base with you in Gebele in 1988, did you know which soldiers were your fellow Isaac clansmen?
Yes, I know majority of them.
When you saw the soldiers captured, when you saw the Isaac soldiers who had been captured by the other soldiers under Colonel Yusuf Abdiali's command, did you recognize them?
Yes.
Did you know personally those soldiers who were captured?
Yes, I knew them.
Were you able to see their faces?
I knew them before, yes.
And did you recognize them as your fellow Isaac soldiers?
Yes, they were no anybody else.